I know on bigger shows that happens a lot, like the CSIs of the world. Directors come in and out and they don't get a lot of time with their cinematographers. And that's got to be scary. That has to be very challenging.
How many times do you read a screenplay before you step on set?
That's a really good question. It's funny, whenever I start a new project and it's, I get the script, I always think I'm going to read it a million times. I think I'm going to read it every night. And inevitably, other things come my way and I end up not reading it as many times as I want. But that said, I read scenes, so I won't read it beginning to end that many times, a few times certainly right at the beginning. But then it really becomes, it very quickly turns into a puzzle. So it's almost like you're given the puzzle all as a finished piece, and then almost immediately you break it up, and then it's little puzzle pieces. And you're like, okay, this one we're gonna do on day 17, this one, and you almost separate it out. And so I'll read the scenes a number of times, but as a whole, I might not revisit it again. It's strange, but also in TV, there are rewrites happening all the time. So you have to reread because there are new drafts coming. And sometimes, this has not happened much, but it has happened where there's a rewrite that happens and you're in week 9 and there's a rewrite and I will have missed an email or something and I won't realize, and we'll be on set and be like, oh, this is where they walk out to the kitchen. And you're like, no, they go to sleep. I remember this. And like, no, in the rewrite, now it goes, and you're like, oh no, like I didn't. And so you scramble, and it sucks when that happens, but it does happen. TV and different shows, some shows are rewriting as you're on set. I mean, Pen 15 has a lot of improv, which is a little different, but they will improvise. And as we're doing it, we'll realize, oh, this affects a scene that we have to shoot next week, or this affects a scene we've already shot. So the whole thing does need to be in my head pretty well. So it's, I guess the answer is I never read it enough. I always think I'm gonna read it more, but it's always close. I'm always, if I have a minute, especially on the day, the morning of, I reread the scenes that we're shooting for the day for sure to refresh. But then I also try to look at, for every scene that you're shooting, you look to either side of it. Like, where did we just come out of? And then what are we going back into? Because that affects your first and last shot in a sequence too. Because you don't want it to be jarring when it cuts to the next thing. So you're trying to hold a lot in your mind.
Do you take any notes or storyboard when you're going through a script?
Yeah, I don't storyboard when I'm reading a script, but I do take notes. I take a lot of notes but it's especially at the beginning, it's very loose. It's whatever occurs to me. Like sometimes that's an actual shot. I'll write down, oh, slow zoom in, or big wide, or whatever that is, or get a close up of the scissors, anything, whatever. If it strikes me, but often, and sometimes it's something a little broader, like handheld. Maybe this is a handheld moment, or maybe this is static, or maybe it's rare at the beginning, but sometimes like a color might occur to me. Something really, I'll let myself jot down anything, and then I'll let future me decide if that's relevant or not. But I do take notes. I don't storyboard, and I have rarely worked with directors who storyboard unless it's a commercial, because it's so much smaller, it's much easier. Or if there's a difficult sequence. Difficult can be, maybe it's an action sequence, or it's just, like let's say 4 people in a car can get very confusing. And so sometimes I'll have directors who will storyboard because they want to make sure like, oh, this and like that everything is kind of intentional. But usually it's shot lists. And so it'll be a list of like, wide, medium close up on her. We need to zoom for this moment. And it's a list. And that's kind of your guide and your map. And very often, that all changes on the day, maybe because an actor goes a certain way, or maybe because you have a new idea. But having that plan goes a long way. And even if you never use a single shot, it means, because there are going to be days where you're not feeling it, where you're not like, you're just whatever. The actors are out of it, or the director's out of it, or I'm out of it. And then you have something to fall back on that will still work. Like this is still still a recipe that in the end you have a scene. So I think it's really important to have that, really important to plan and talk that out. But then on the day, always being ready for something better. Or if just something changes dramatically, you lose a location or whatever. I think being able to improvise is really valuable.
Do you come up with your own shot list, or do you always leave that up to the director?
Generally, the director brings a shot list. Very often we do that together. That's the ideal, is that a director and I, the best, what I find is the best way, it's just generally not practical, is to be able to go with the director to a location and be up on your feet and actually like walk around, use the phone as a little, like take pictures, we'll do that. That's the ideal. Rarely do you have time to go ahead of time with a director to a location. Usually you have to pay for locations whenever you're there. So, but yeah, generally it's with a director, you sit through each scene and you talk it out and you're kind of imagining how, actors might move in the space and what moments do you need. But sometimes a director will just come with their own shot list that they've done on their own, and then I look through it, we talk through it, maybe I have suggestions. Really where I think one of the strengths that I have is on the day, because you're always battling time, is watching the directors and actors walk through a scene. When I can see it up on its feet, I can often figure out a way to combine 2 or 3 shots into one. Like, oh, if she starts here and then she walks to there and I slide the camera here, then we'll actually get both of those shots on your list. Like that's something that I think is very helpful for time, but also, trying to cut down on the number of shots just for to try and control the edit a little bit, to tell the story again with intention. Is that it's like, well, instead of just putting the camera here and then putting it here and putting it here and putting it here, it's like maybe we can travel, maybe this actor's move can pull the camera, and now you're in a new setup that gets you this other thing that you wanted. But it's a combination for sure. And different directors, some are better at shot listing, some are worse, some hate it, some love it. And so I have to be kind of amenable to all of that.
How much do you plan out the day before your shoot?
The ideal is that every day is very well planned out. And that doesn't mean it won't change, because it will change, but the ideal is that way. Now, that said, sometimes working on series, you don't get time to prep with the directors. Some directors come in and let's say they're doing episodes 4 and 5. And they, you've hopefully met them, but even sometimes you're meeting them on the day and they're coming in and they've done their own prep that's separate from you. And you try to do your best to work with them. And I know on bigger shows that happens a lot, like the CSIs of the world. Directors come in and out and they don't get a lot of time with their cinematographers. And that's got to be scary. That has to be very challenging. I've been lucky enough that that's rare for me. Usually I get some time with them, but very often a director will come in with a plan that I have never seen before. And then I will, depending on their comfort level, I will try and make that fit like our location a little more, or the feel of the show, because I've been shooting it for a while. So I'm like, oh, normally we won't zoom here or whatever that is. So it varies. And then I have worked with directors where we just have a good rhythm and we just kind of wing it. You know, like we show up on the day, and I'm pretty good at, if I have actors and a director and all that, I can figure out what shots create a scene for sure. So, but that's taken years of shooting shows for sure. But at this point, I feel pretty comfortable with that.